Red Set Annually Productions
presents The Beat Factory.
Hey, welcome to The Beat Factory. Take a seat, have a sat. We're going to talk about some music today. Today we're going to talk about Childish Gambino's latest album, 3:15:20. I'm sure many people are aware of the musical cred that he gained from This Is America, which was an incredible track. I love the music video as well. I don't know if many people know that the same guy who directs Atlanta, the FX show that Donald Glover is the star in, that same director directed the music video. Fun little factoid. Of course, with the title 3:15:20, this album was initially uploaded onto DonaldGloverPresents.com on March 15th. So it wasn't available for streaming until the March 22nd. And I think what I'd like to do with this album is kind of focus on Childish Gambino's, aka Donald Glover, on his musical choices, because the soundscape that he's creating is definitely experimental. Something that I've heard before from Childish Gambino projects, but something about this one sounds a little more edgy. A lot more freedoms have been taken in terms of instrumentation, kind of overall direction of the, you could call musical instruments that were chosen. I would probably give DJ Dahi most of the credit for the sound direction of this album, because his name shows up most in the track listing for producers. He's worked with a bunch of people: Iggy Azalea, Travis Scott, Kendrick Lamar. What I loved seeing doing my research was with Big Crit. And if you're a Big Crit fan, Galactica, one of the best projects that he's ever released. And once I found that out, I was like, okay, that makes sense for what this 3:15 is creating. I also want to focus on the music for this project, primarily because I don't think Childish Gambino is known for his lyricism. With This Is America, it was definitely a social criticism. Donald Glover is not afraid to dip his toes into, not controversy, but making political observations, societal observations, however you want to describe it. He doesn't just sing about, loving girls and partying, but he will take that chance and try to make a point. But I don't think that's what is the standout aspect of this project. I think the major success story of this project is the use of space. And what I mean by that is that there are clear distinctions being used between the low frequencies, the bass, the mid, and the high. Each instrument decision is answering that question of which of these three spaces will this hook fit. Now you might think organizing a track in that manner would be limiting in terms of creativity, but what you can do, and that's what I think is used really effectively in this project, is that you can play with stereo, with panning. You can put an instrument in the left ear, in the right ear. You can really create a sense of space when you organize where each musical phrase sits within the track itself. I think I need to make a disclaimer, is that the Beat Factory has recently relocated, and you may be hearing some noises in the background because our walls are thinner and we have people living upstairs. There's also a dog that likes to sit next to me and maybe chewing on a bone. But regardless, we're here to talk about some music. Getting back on track. Referring to the tracks and the space that they have. That's the main thing. That's what I want to get across to people, is that this project is a perfect example of organizing the soundscape. And that's another reason I don't want to talk about essentially the lyrics of this album, because even the track names are basically the timestamp of when each track starts. So if you're unwilling to name the track, then do you think that the lyrics are important too? I don't know. Creative choice. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but I know what I feel about the music. And since the point, I think, of this project is playing with that soundscape, of course you're going to start with your first track essentially being that, a drone, a high-pitched voice, reverb, creating a meditative space. You're essentially starting to create your musical environment of where you're beginning. You're trying to establish your listener in a world, in a creative environment that now you get to control. You're resetting, you're calming everyone down. You're saying, this is where we're beginning. I'm about to move you forward. And I think it's really interesting where he has this little piano lick sitting in the track. And that's something that I think he's playing with a lot, is that if you play with the treble and the bass, essentially if you equalize each instrument, you pull it forward or back on where it sits. And for some reason, he has it sitting kind of just a little back. It doesn't sound like it's in front of you. It's kind of like it's a little further, almost like it's on stage. It's a very interesting place to put that sound during your first introduction to 3:15:20. He's saying, look, we're creating a wide space. It's not in a studio. He's trying to create, I think, an experience and environment where the instruments almost have a 3D effect. They're not just stationary. Another cool thing about this project is that it's essentially one long song, is that he's using transitions to connect each track to the next one. He's finding a musical element from the next track and then using it in the ending in a creative way to kind of give each song its own space, but then finding that bridge between each one. And he does that right in the beginning, because at the end of the first track, what he does is he basically uses the voice and starts breaking it down slowly to where essentially it's just all going to this high-pass filter and using delay, and the voice becomes an instrument, turning into a synth. And then for the second track, which actually has a title, Algorithm, now he's using this choppy synth rhythm to create the new vibe. I like that he's using distorted voice versus the stylistic singing that we all kind of know for Childish Gambino. He's using those to kind of distinguish between verse and chorus. And this is the kind of first use of that use of stereo, of panning to the left, to the right, placing instruments and vocals in a 3D space within the track itself. And what I thought is really interesting is that for this song, he's using the low frequencies as a foundation. Essentially, that bass line, that droning thing, is the whole song. And what he does is he's basically using the kick as the driving force for the entire song. Basically, the kick and the bass are mirrored. They're right on top of each other, and that's the only driving force. There's not much melody to this. We're moving forward with emotion, with energy, which I think is a good contrast from the first track to this one, because that was more creating space, and now we're going to start taking you somewhere. And he keeps doing that. For like the third track, it's entitled Time. He's doing the same thing where the bottom section of the track is filled with the kick and the 808. And then he starts putting the guitar in the middle. And then he starts doing a little bit of the female vocals, which is over this drone. Again, we're using space. We've got 3 specific areas. We've got the bass, the mid, the high, and the bass is completely filled. He's found a way to put that guitar in the middle, and it's not in front of you. He's pulling it back within the track. So and I want to try to explain that again, is that the location of that instrument is not in front of you. It's pushed a little further back. It sounds like it's a distance away from you. And I'm not saying it sounds like it's really far, like in the hills. I'm saying that you can play with that and you can make something sound like if your buddy's playing your guitar right next to you, or if maybe he's across the way, on the couch or something, just 6 feet away. But doing that, playing with that kind of space, gives you depth. It gives you a feeling of space. And if we're playing with that use of space, when the choir comes in on the third track, I wish it was sitting a little more forward. It's because it's something very interesting. The harmonies he's using are very interesting, and I kind of wish that he had made it more of a prominent thing, but he didn't do that. When you introduce this new thing and these new harmonies, I want to hear that. Instead, this song really relies on the kick as the huge driver of the track. And the way he makes this song connect to the next one is that he basically breaks it down where he's got some nature sounds, frogs and crickets and stuff, and he's got this electric noises going in transitions, which then moves on to the next song. And the next song is entitled 12:38, and it starts at minute 12:38. And again, I don't want to talk about the lyrics because this whole vibe of this song is definitely a Prince. It's definitely funk. It's definitely pulling from that Prince vibe. But the way he's singing it kind of makes the lyrics sound like a joke, like you can't take it seriously. So you have to really focus on just the groove that he's creating. And again, I'm going to repeat myself talking about that space. The synth in this track fits real back. It's almost no treble. But then throughout the song, he's pulling it forward. So if you listen to it, it's sitting really far away from you, and then it kind of starts coming closer. So there's this 3D effect happening. The space is being filled. There's movement within where you're experiencing the music. And essentially at this point is when I realized that this whole album is basically a vibe album. It's just a bunch of grooves, and he's kind of moving us in and out of this musical space he's created. This track's a really good example of the use of stereo and panning because where the main vocal sits is kind of in the middle, and at any time that he has a vocal accompaniment and he uses it as kind of like a punch he puts harmonies on specific words, specific phrases that he wants to be emphasized. He's panned left and right those specific sounds. It gives that harmony in the vocals a brighter presence in the track. It's not just him, then you layer on harmonies on top of it, making it sound like an instrument. When you pan to the left, to the right, when you use that stereo, you're making it sound larger. I really like where this track goes. There's a bunch of features, including 21 Savage. It's basically really hooky. I love the transition into the next track, 1910, because basically it's a real slow speed up. It's still that Prince vibe. But now I kind of feel like it's more sexy. The distorted singing's very interesting, and the beat just starts to drive. I would call this the first dance track in the album. Everything else was still catchy and it sounded good, but I think he was still creating that space. 910 is kind of where he starts like, okay, now we're in the club. Now we can start dancing. And that's why I thought it was an interesting choice that he kind of stopped that vibe when he did the transition. Because he starts doing this crazy electronic sounds and then just does a hard stop. And that makes sense because the next one, the vibe is like real slow. And it's just basically just the bass and the rhythm. And then he adds in the voice, but that's really distorted. And he has this kind of like filtered, like really interesting. It almost sounds like a distorted guitar, but it could be a synth, but it's mirroring the vocals, and that's all it's all you're hearing. And then he drops the bass out, and he brings in this kind of like rhythm electric guitar thing. Then you start hearing the vocal chorus, choir harmonies. The rhythm bass, they hold this entire track together. It's just a big head bob. I guess you're supposed to like dance and then get tired, and then you should be able just to kind of groove and sit and enjoy it. Probably one of my top favorite tracks on this project because it kind of sounds like an old school Motown vibe. because of the bass and the rhythm section, are the big prominent, focal point of the track. But it's like a slow Motown vibe, but not like a, like Motown would, like whenever they were slow songs, they were like really lovey and like emotional. This is more just kind of like a, I don't know, I guess people would call it like a lo-fi, but not even that, because you're giving it so much bass and rhythm into it. It's definitely something that I can groove to, and that's one of the songs I'll be putting on repeat, I'll tell you that. And then for the next track, we stay with that bass being the main thing, only this one now, once again, we're using those really cool transitions where we're able to kind of like create this drive, and then we drop everything, and now we're kind of like in a house club mix. It's not just like a dance track, but like really like it's like real drop down. I mean, there's even like a build up essentially where like you would hear in like a regular trance, art house, the club mix. And what's really cool is that he starts the bass line, but then when he throws the vocals in, I almost feel like the vocals change the downbeat. It just kind of pulls you into a new space. It's so cool. Top favorite track of the whole project, track 8, 3531. Now this is not my quote, but somebody said that it sounds like an old school Outkast footwork song. I can't say any better. It's so good. It's super catchy, and it's like so beautiful, and it's got that old school vibe. And it's just so broken down in terms of like it's such a simple track. But it's all about just selling coke and making decisions on why we're selling coke. But it's so pretty, and I love when we do that. I love when songs are about like, not a fun subject. It's not, the reality of poverty and people having to make decisions to be able to sustain their livelihood, but then doing it in a manner that puts them at risk and their neighbors and their family and everything else, but because they don't have any other choice. Like, that's not a fun thing to talk about. And yet this song is so freaking beautiful. It sounds so good. The harmonies, the drive. In the mid-song, there's like this really awesome like breakdown that is not even expected. There's just so much in this track. Favorite. Track 8, 3531. Favorite. Love it. Gotta listen to it. 3928, track 9. Definitely sounds kind of like an art song. And that's interesting that he would choose to kind of like go in that direction. It's just basically like solo vocals with like really strange harmonies. And there's like some piano in there. But it's just, it's definitely experimenting. And there's no rhythm section. It's just something that, again, it's pretty. And it's definitely a major contrast from the last track. He's doing that. He'll kind of bring you somewhere, and then he'll immediately find a way to do a transition to pull you into a completely different headspace. I'm not going to talk about track 10. He titles it 4226, but basically it was Feels Like Summer. It has a Vampire Weekend vibe. I guess I had to say something about it. But he released it previously in the summer pack, so I mean, you've already heard it. I don't know. It's a good song, and I like it, but in terms of the project, I don't know. Did you really have to redo, re-release it under a different track name? How about you just tell me what it was already called, or maybe give me something more? Maybe I'm just being, selfish. Like I want more. Don't give me something you already gave. This is whatever, man. Your choice, not mine. Track 11 is really fun. 4748. Once again, it's a timestamp essentially, but it's funk, and it's got that Stevie Wonder vibe because of the electric piano. Kind of like a Rhodes piano. This track is so awesome because it basically sets up the groove, bass, electric piano, drums, getting it going, getting the feel, and he just drops it all and brings in the vocals, and then boom, groove starts again. I love when tracks do that. It just kind of just drives, man. I tell you what. And then the last track's pretty cool too. It's pretty cool. I don't know. The main thing I can say about it is that he's still using all those things we've been talking about space, talking about where we're putting instruments in the track. But what I think is interesting is that the way he chooses to deliver the verses, it's probably the harshest, the most angry delivery. But he's singing about finding the happiness in everything. So that's really interesting creative choice in terms of like, contrasting the meaning of the song with how you're delivering the lyrics, using the opposite. It's very interesting. So all in all, I really do think you should listen to this. If for any other reason, listen to it as an example of creating space on a project, of finding where each instrument, each piece you're adding to the track, finding where it fits. Does it go in the bass, in the mid, or in the high? And then using that, playing with placing instruments to your left, to your right, forward and back. Create that space. A lot of people listen to their music with headphones. And you can still do that with speakers too. Remember that you can create an experience that is more than just listening to a song. You can put someone somewhere. And I think that's kind of what he wants to do. I think that's clear with the first track of creating like a meditative vibe. And then throughout the rest of the project, you're placing people, instruments, vocals in a 3D space. It's not just flat. Each instrument occupies a different place within the musical environment that Donald Glover makes. And with that, I hope you can subscribe, hope you like, listen to this on SoundCloud, follow us, listen to some other things, and we'll hope to see you guys again in the Beat Factory when we listen to some more music.